Hello and welcome to the Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray, and I'm excited in a way. You'll understand this as we go through this show about our guest. I am excited about him. The topic always makes me a little nervous. So I'm always, I need to get some courage and strength through this conversation with him, because it's a topic that is in our face after the new year, right? I don't know about you, but every ad you look at, everything that comes up is about weight loss or exercise or, and sometimes you just get overwhelmed. But I was really excited when I was contacted about this book called The God of Endurance, because I think so often we look at physical health as totally separate. Like it's just kind of out there, something we have to do. It's a drudgery. And so the idea is this book, calling it the God of Endurance, really made me certainly want to read it. And I love the kind of the subtitle here, A Practical Guide for Incorporating Exercise and Nutrition into Your Spiritual Journey. So I think this is a great book for us to start out the new year with. I wrote notes in the margins. I wrote all kinds of things all around it. And I'm so excited that it's kind of a co-authored book. Dan Burke, you might be familiar with that name if you do a lot of Catholic reading. He's written The Discernment of Spirits. He does a lot of things that kind of revolve around spiritual direction. So Dan and the man who is with us today, Chase Crouse, wrote this book. And let me tell you a little bit about Chase. Amazing life here. It took a pivotal turn in 2012 when he experienced a profound reversion of faith. And soon after, he joined Net Ministries as a missionary from 2012 to 2014, a period that sparked immense personal growth. And as a side note, when I was at a Catholic high school working here in Toledo as the pastoral director, we had Net come into our school for part of our retreat week. They were amazing. So thank you, Chase, for doing that. Building on this foundation, he earned a bachelor's and master's in biblical theology from John Paul the Great Catholic University. And following his studies, he and his wife moved to New York, where he found a calling to integrate theology of the body with fitness. As a husband and father of 4, he understands firsthand the importance of nurturing both body and spirit. He's a certified personal trainer, functional fitness specialist, nutrition coach, and change psychology specialist. And through his program, Hypuro, I think I'm saying that right, or Hypuro Fit, he combines his spiritual, intellectual, and physical expertise to inspire others to embrace self-gift and personal growth. Woo, that is a mouthful, Chase, but very much needed. How are you today? Welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
This, how did you and kind of Dan Burke come together to write this book?
Yeah, so it's funny. He Googled Catholic personal training a couple years back, and we are the only company that does that. So, so he found us through a providential Google search. Reached out. I started working with him because he was really struggling and had a lot of health issues. Mm-hmm. Really hated working out, and didn't eat terribly poorly, but didn't eat terribly well either. And so. I started working with him, and he's an amazing man. And first couple of months, he wasn't terribly excited, but he was like, okay, this is something I feel like I need to do. And but after a while, he caught the bug, and he really learned, our philosophy that we teach, our methodology, and he, kind of went full force into that, built a home gym in his house, and got in shape. And he kind of talks about in the forward of the book a little bit. Now, he argues in the best shape of his life, even in the 60s. And so we just became, fast friends after that. And then when the idea of the book, kind of came up, over a year ago now, and, I brought it to him. I brought kind of the first draft to him, and I was like, hey, Dan, is this not good or is this good? Or tell me, you're an author. Tell me if this sucks or not. Basically. Right. And so he read the first draft and was like, hey, I think this is awesome. I think this could really help a lot of people. And, let's team up on it. So that way, because he's written books, he kind of knows
Sure.
the process, and it was kind of almost like my personal book writing coach through this thing as he was writing it with me, and it was kind of took off from there.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you, Chase, I just have tons of questions. I mean, I read this, I made notes, I did all kinds of stuff in the margins. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be kind of delving into different things, but then I also want to kind of get your take on some of the stuff that's out there that we're kind of, bombarded with sometimes. So I want to kind of start off, though, because right out of the gate, you talk about something called the law of self-gift. Can you explain that to our audience and how that's all connected to what you're doing here in this book?
Yeah, I'd love to. So that's really, that's the foundation, and really, everything what we kind of form around. People often ask me, what is the Catholic approach to fitness? Is that a thing? And I tell them, I definitely don't try to Catholicize exercise by any means. When I started my company 5 years ago, I would look at the Catholic doctors and lawyers and business professionals in my life, and they didn't try to Catholicize surgery, right? They weren't, rosary beads inside somebody, but rather because of our faith, they were inspired to be as technically excellent as they can be. And so the law of gift really comes about from my light bulb moment where I was, training in New York. I was kind of moonlighting as a personal trainer while I was working for the Archdiocese there. And I was really confronted with this question of, as a Catholic, should I care about all this?
Mm-hmm.
I played sports my whole life and I've been working out, but was it something that could be redemptive and could glorify God? And so I went back to JP2's theology of the body, which I'd studied formally, in my undergrad and my master's, but I was looking, I was like, man, is there an answer to this question? Can this be redemptive? Can this be something that glorifies God? And he talks early on about this hermeneutic of gift, this law of gift, namely that he quotes Gaudium et Spes, which is man finds himself through a sincere gift of self.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so this is this law of gift. And so if you've ever studied theology of the body formally, it's essentially a scripture exegesis. It's a Bible study, right?
Mm-hmm.
But through this lens of gift, right? Man finds himself through a sincere gift of self and Gaudium et Spes. And so this is, for JP2, the lens that he reads scripture through, this law of gift, namely, starting even with the Trinity, the Father who eternally gives himself to the Son totally receives that gift and then reciprocates fully the gift of himself back to the Father. And this mutual exchange of gift spirates the love of the Holy Spirit, spirates the person of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Trinity giving of itself totally to humanity, right? And inspiring us to fully receive and fully reciprocate the gift, going then to Adam and Eve, right? The husband fully giving himself to the wife. So anyway, you can keep going,
right.
Kind of ad infinitum here, but this law of gift is really the inspiration. And then what JP2 does, though, in Audience 15, paragraph 2, he says very profoundly, and this is my light bulb moment, while that's true that man finds himself through a sincere gift of self, you can't give what you don't have. So self-mastery is indispensable if self-gift is the goal.
Yeah. Wow. That is. I mean, and I think in our society today, self-mastery is a tough thing, isn't it? What do you think makes it so tough for people?
I think for a lot of Catholics that I've worked with, they view, as exercise, nutritional discipline, self-mastery kind of in the wrong light. And they forget that the church has been teaching about the virtue of temperance for 2,000 years.
Right.
And really what we're doing is, what the thing I'm doing is trying to, teach an applied theology of the body, an applied approach to virtue, namely in using exercise and nutritional discipline really as a tool of the modern day ascetic, right? This is a tool we can use in our modern world to practice the virtue of temperance, right, in a very tangible, real way. And, a lot of us in the West, obviously, we live very comfortable lives. We live desk jobs. And in all fairness, we've been raised, no matter how old you are, if you're born, the past, 90 years, whether there's different degrees of it, but we've been raised in a society of comfort, right?
Yes.
Of ease,
Yes.
Every decade, things get easier physically. Every decade, things get more efficient, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? We're saving lives. We're being more, profitable. All these things aren't necessarily bad in of themselves.
Right.
But if they lead then to this attitude of discomfort equals bad, right? I think that can be a misstep, because then once again, if I can't mentally force my body to do something it doesn't want to do, or if I can't stop myself from swinging through the drive-through because I can't wait 10 minutes till I get home, and then another 10 minutes to cook, there's an element of self-mastery, of temperance that I don't possess. Therefore, there's an element of self-gift that I cannot give. Right? And if the purpose of our life is to be like Jesus Christ in all things, including and necessitating his perfect and total gift of himself to the Father on the cross, that's a misstep, right?
Right.
So we need to pray for the grace to conform to the image and likeness of Jesus Christ in his total gift of self.
Well, one of the things, Chase, I think too, and I kind of pick your brain a little bit here, is the book is called Endurance, right? God of Endurance. And so the idea of enduring and persevering is certainly closely tied with that idea of temperance, right? Being able to kind of endure in that moment. But how do you help people to work on that virtue of temperance? What kind of ways, because I'll just be very honest, even with myself, I know that when I'm tired or have a headache, my first response is to eat, even though I'm not hungry. And so, and I kind of just mindlessly do that a lot of times. And so how do you help people understand that, to be able to build that self-mastery in their lives, that temperance, that endurance?
Yeah. I think part of it can stem from grace builds on nature, right? So the natural part of that is, in this case, when I have a lot of clients who stress eat or get tired and eat, part of that is a physiological response, right? If you're telling your body, hey, I need you to move, I need you to perform, but you're sleep deprived or you're tired from the day, that your natural instinct for your body is to say, okay, I need energy that I don't have, feed me, right?
Okay.
So there's a natural component here. Let's not take that as a misstep. This isn't just purely like a vice thing. This is your body being like, you're asking something of me, therefore give me the fuel I need to perform. Right. And so some of this starts with just the basics of like learning to go to bed at the same time, learning to wake up at the same time, learning to eat the right amount of food. So I'm a big fan when I start working with people of this idea we talk about in the book of adding before subtracting.
Yes. Right. I saw that.
Instead of always worrying about what not to eat or what not to do, try eating enough of the right things. Protein, fiber, fruits and veggies, all these things, right? The right kind of carbs, right? Because that's going to fuel you for success. It's going to give you the energy you need to perform well, making sure your sleep is dialed in, right? Not staying up unnecessarily and all these things. So that way you're at least set up for success. And so once again, grace builds on nature. And so I think one thing that we have to remember too is that temperance is not a virtue that was invented by the Catholic Church.
Right.
It's been sanctified. It's been elevated. But the four cardinal virtues can be kind of come to through natural reason alone. Pagan philosophers would talk about, the four cardinal virtues, right?
Right.
And so it's for us, the four cardinal virtues can be achieved, and effectively and a lot harder, but they can be achieved without grace. Right.
Exactly.
But we recognize that grace is a gift to help us to pursue, because we also have the three theological virtues, which are obviously Christian. Right. And so understanding that we need to start with the basics, understand that also on the flip side of this, if we're trying to grow in a certain virtue or decrease a certain vice, doing things like a particular examen before bed in conjunction with running to the confessional, right? Again and again. And so because temperance is a natural virtue, we can work on it, right? But at the same time, we also don't want to unnecessarily bifurcate our faith from our pursuit of a virtue. And so clinging to Jesus, running to Jesus is like, Jesus, please give me the grace to work on this particular thing because I'm struggling in it right now. And the third kind of part of this is then with those two things kind of in place and practicing, also not falling prey to the two spirits of speed and perfectionism, right? Because those two things can really hinder somebody. Because it's analogous when you first started your personal prayer life. When you first start praying, you don't start with a holy hour. Right. You pray, you do the daily readings for 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the morning, right? And then some days you forget, sometimes you do it, but you keep showing up until eventually it becomes habitualized, right? Same thing with exercise, same thing with eating well. You start with, instead of going from 0 to 10, go from 0 to 1. and then go from 1 to 2, and then go from 2 to 3, right?
Right.
And so that it's just taking that systematic methodological approach without giving into the spirit of, well, if I can't do everything, I might as well not do nothing. That's the spirit of perfectionism.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or, man, this person does this already. I can't believe I'm not doing it yet. I might as well just quit. Well, they've been working on it for 10 years. You've been doing it for 10 days.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's so many elements here, but it's trying to help people kind of see this from multiple angles and then journeying with them, holding them accountable, and understanding how we can apply it to their lifestyle.
Wow. So that's great. So one of the things that I was kind of, I wasn't amazed, but the statistic did kind of jump out at me. In your book, you say in 1980, 13.4% of Americans were obese. In 2008, it was 34.3%. And you said it's usually around 36% now. So it's doubled. So in 20 years. So is that... I mean, I know we can say, well, technology, all these other kinds of things, but is our attitude, is our understanding, I mean, what all plays into this?
Yeah, it's a few things. Yeah, and this is something there's a lot of different sides and opinions here. I'll give you my opinion, and I will state that this is an opinion.
Sure.
Please, nobody go around and start being an online warrior about this. But so I think it's multiple factors. It's one. Hyper palatable, overly processed foods are way more affordable and way more prevalent now, right?
Right.
So one thing I will never say is that certain foods are always bad, hard stop, right?
Right.
Like, people want to die on the hill of seed oils and things like that.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I love avocado oil, I love olive oil, those are my preferences. But I took my kids to Chick-fil-A the other day, and I'm not going to worry about it, right? That's the Lord's chicken. But once again, if societally we are a lot less active because most of us have desk job, we're commuting. You're spending 2 hours a day commuting, to and from work, and you literally just aren't expending a lot of calories when you drive, even if you think you're stressed out because of road rage or whatever.
Right.
And then also, people, say, oh, I don't eat a lot of food. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. But they swing by Starbucks and they get their double chocolatey chip frappuccino and a muffin. And all of a sudden they've eaten 1,200 calories, even though they still feel hungry.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
but that is so good, Chase.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. It's delicious. I love me a double chocolate chip frappuccino, but it's from a nutrient density perspective, not ideal.
Yeah.
And so there's so many factors, but we are as a society optimizing and making things so efficient that it requires a lot less movement, a lot less effort,
does.
right?
Yeah.
We're not exercising. I think it's only I think it's less than, what was the last stat I saw? I think it was only 14% of Americans have a gym membership or exercise regularly, right?
I can believe that.
And so not to say you have to, everybody has to have a gym membership. There's other ways you can stay active. But,
right.
And then once again, we have a overly highly accessible, hyper palatable, calorically dense foods easily available. And I think part of it too is there's a workaholism here culturally, kind of coming from the Protestant work ethic that's infiltrated America in a lot of ways that tells us that we need to go the extra, quote unquote, extra mile in our work. And work late hours or early mornings or be unavailable on the weekends, and we lose time. And if we lose time, we don't have time to cook, right?
Right.
And so we're having to buy out and all these things. And so I think part of living a well-balanced, well-ordered life is understanding that, the work is there not for its own sake, right? The work is there to help us provide in order to provide for us and our families so that we may glorify God and live the best lives we possibly can. And I think part of that is cooking your own food, right?
Right.
And so there's so many factors here. But I think looking at your lifestyle, looking at, okay, where are my priorities? And there's going to be certain seasons where the quote unquote optimal nutrition plan or workout plan is just not going to be possible. Like for example, I have a 3.5-month-old baby. I have 4 kids. And in the first month or two, of my baby's life, my wife was not in a quote unquote optimal plan. Right.
Right.
And she was, we're both kind of sleep deprived. Mm-hmm. Right. And, but after 6-7 weeks, or even before that, really, basically as soon as she could, she did start walking when she could, right? Taking the baby on a walk, herself walking. And then, once she got cleared by the doctor, she did start lifting weights again. Mm-hmm. She started working out again, and whenever she could, when it was reasonable, right? Right. And so there is a seasonality to this, but once again, if we acquire the virtue, right, then we understand that becomes the rule. There are exceptions to the rule, but the exception doesn't become the rule.
I like that. I like that. And one of the things, since we're talking about, we talked about obesity and some of the causes that are out there today, there also seems to be, and I want to kind of get your take on this, is it possible to be healthy and obese? Our society's given us mixed messages now, or segments of our society is, that you can be obese and sometimes even morbidly obese and still be healthy. Is that true? Or is that, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So some of this comes from bad science and people kind of in the body positivity camp that you're speaking of. Mm-hmm. We'll say I'm obese or I'm medically morbidly obese, but I did my blood work and everything is fine.
Right.
Well, blood work is only one of many different metrics to track health. Right? So now one thing to understand is that different people do have different genetic predispositions to certain body fat percentages. Right? Okay. So, and we all carry fat a little bit differently, but at the same time, the reason for the diagnosis of obesity or medical obesity, the reason we have those things is because considering your height, your weight, your age, your gender, all these things, considering your genetic predisposition, you are carrying more body fat than is good for you. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, and we have the studies. This is not new science. There's dozens and dozens of studies on this. And people that have more body fat than is medically necessary. So for women should and typically need to carry more body fat than men, percentage-wise. Okay. Right? And so for childbearing, for their breasts, all these things, that's fat.
Right.
And so it's not a bad thing. But we know that if somebody is medically speaking carrying more body fat than their body needs to, then your percentage of increase of cancer, of metabolic issues, of overall health, your longevity, all of that gets jeopardized. And so your all-cause mortality, triples, right? Compared to somebody who isn't. And now on the opposite side of that, once again, it's people that don't have enough body fat. There's so many problems with that, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's not sustainable. There's metabolic issues. There's hormonal issues. And so virtue is in the mean, always. Right. It's somewhere in the middle. Right. And so what I never want to say, never want to say is that if somebody has too much body fat, therefore they're a bad person. That's not. Oh, no, right? Yeah. And so, or you're less valuable or something like that. We're Catholic. We don't have a utilitarian mindset.
Exactly.
Right? People have infinite value because they're children of the Father, right? But at the same time, we also recognize that we have a duty to do what we can to be as healthy as possible. So that way, when and if God does call us to serve, we are in the best position to do that. Right? Yeah. And so even about a third of my clients are priests and religious. And, so many of them start working with me, priest-wise especially, because they're in their 40s or 50s and they can't genuflect anymore. Oh, yeah. Or they're, they get called in sick calls or, they're trying to walk around conferences and they're like, this is harder than it needs to be. I'm too young. The church needs me too much. Right. For this to be this hard. Right? And that goes back to the first law, right? The law of self-gift. If you can't give it if you don't have it. So, right. We've got about 2.5 minutes left in this segment, Chase, but I do think part of people that are, because I've been involved in ministry since 1978. And I think one of the things we find in ministry is the selflessness, right? I want to be of service to others, service to the Lord through others.
And so that always comes first, and then you look
Right.
at your schedule and there's no time left for you because there's always great need out there. And so I think for a lot of people of faith, and especially in a ministry capacity, you're combating this feeling of selfishness when you take care of yourself. Does that sound familiar, or does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so people tell me that all the time, especially coming from ministry, or even not, just kind of coming from whatever vocation, but especially priest and religious. But my counter argument is the second greatest commandment is to love others as you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I'm so glad you're helping people right now. But if you want to keep helping people in 30 years, then something's got to change.
Right.
And so I tell my priest clients this all the time, especially when they're younger. I was like, yeah, you have a heart for service and you want to give and give and give. But you're going to be physically forced to stop giving potentially when you're 55 or 65 or forced into retirement. Right. Or, whatever the case may be. And so, but I think it's also a trick of the enemy, this is a lie of the enemy to say like, hey, like, you're not as important. Hey, you're not as valuable. Like, you need to give. Like, no, don't care about yourself.
Right.
And I'm not going to speak for Jesus, but I don't think the heart of the Lord is going to whisper in my ear, I'm not important, or I'm not worth it, or I'm not valuable. Right.
Very true.
I don't think that's going to be the good spirit.
Yeah.
Ignatius is Loyalist words here.
Yeah. Oh, well, Chase, we are already at break time, and I want to let the audience know who we're talking to. Today, we're talking to Chase Crouse. He is just an amazing guy. He has what a background. He's a revert to the faith, but he was part of Net Ministries. He's got his undergrad and his bachelor's and master's degree in biblical theology from the John Paul the Great Catholic University. He has integrated the theology of the body with fitness. And so he's a husband, a father of 4, so he knows what it's like to be busy. And he certainly understands kind of how to nurture both body and spirit, which I think is what we're all aiming for, right? So he's a certified personal trainer, functional fitness specialist, nutrition coach, change psychology specialist. He has a program, Hypera, which we'll talk about in the second half of the show. But it really is this whole idea of a holistic approach to the human person. And the book we're talking about is called The God of Endurance. So come back on the other side of the break as we continue what I think is a fascinating conversation on this, and really needed, I think, at the top of the new year as we're all faced with these ads and ideas. So we can really look at our own lives and do what is good and healthy. And I love that law of self-gift. You can't give what you don't have. So come back on the other side of the break. You're listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.
Jesus commanded his disciples to go forth and preach the gospel to all nations. This they did in word and in deed. More recently, the Second Vatican Council reaffirmed every Catholic's role in this Great Commission. In answer to this call, St. Paul Street Evangelization has developed a unique, non-confrontational approach to this mandate, loosely modeled after the modern pro-life movement. We aren't like many other evangelists that are pushy and in your face. We don't stand and yell on street corners or force anyone to listen to us if they don't want to. Instead, St. Paul Street Evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic, and non-confrontational presence to a world hungry for the truth. For more information on how you can help, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's www.streetevangelization.com.
The married singles lifestyle describes couples that may have lost the sense of closeness they once had and are living more like roommates. Retrovi teaches couples how to survive times like these in their marriages. Retrovi has helped tens of thousands of couples around the world. To learn more about Retrovi or to register for a weekend near you, call 1-800-470-2230 or visit us on the web at www.helpourmarriage.com.
Hello and welcome back to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray, and today we have with us Chase Crouse. Chase is author of The God of Endurance, a book that is a practical guide for incorporating exercise and nutrition into your spiritual journey. And he just has a wealth of information. He has his undergrad and graduate degree in biblical studies. He's a personal trainer. He's got all these wonderful kind of certifications, accreditations that he brings to this idea, which is what I love, is that he's talking about the physical, but knowing that it's so much connected to the whole, the spiritual and the emotional. So welcome back, Chase. Great to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
One of the things, and I want to kind of jump on this, and then I'll get into a few more nitty gritties with your book itself, because it's great stuff in here. But I want to kind of, because you heard me say, like, after the first of the year, we get bombarded with physical, stuff in our emails. Try this program, try that program, this physical fitness thing, and I must admit, sometimes I just feel overwhelmed, the keto, the Mediterranean, the this, don't eat carbs, do eat carbs. What do I do with all of that? What's the best way to do when you get hit with these kinds of things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think the warning I'll always want to give is if you ever hear somebody online speaking in definitives, like this is always better, everybody should always blah, blah, blah. Be very careful, right? Because especially in the nutrition world, everybody is different, everybody's unique. And yeah, we have general principles that for most people apply and we're going to be really good, but there's always going to be gray. There's always going to be different situations, right? So for example, gluten for the vast majority of people is totally fine. If you're gluten intolerant or celiac, then it's awful for you, right? And so even protein, in my book, I talk a lot about the importance of protein.
Yes.
But I've also worked with clients who have some kidney and some colon issues that makes high protein just literally unsafe for them, right? And so we have to say, okay, even though this is the ideal, we have to then take this specific individual, the specific person in front of us, and figure out a way to optimize the ideal for them. Right? So once again, in general, we have principles that for most people are going to be good advice for.
Right.
But once again, if you ever hear somebody say everyone must do X, Y, or Z, or everyone has to do X, Y, or Z,
right,
or this is always good, or this is always bad, just be careful.
Okay.
Right? And so, so in the thing I'll always start with is, let's, instead of going to the extremes, which I'm not even opposed to the extreme. I've had clients before who, we've had to go on, I've had to coach them through like a carnivore because they were just having some autoimmune stuff and they were really they just couldn't figure out what food was making them feel as bad as it was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, cool. Let's just cut out everything but, meat and then slowly reintroduce one food at a time until we could figure out what it was. Right? And so once again, it's not that I'm opposed to any one or even I don't even advocate any one diet or nutritional protocol. Understanding that they're all just different tools we can use for the individual in front of us. That's
a great way to look at it. So it is because I think sometimes people, and myself included, you might try some of these thinking, I'm going to lose all this weight, and then you don't. Yeah. And then you feel like, well, then you just give up. Well, if this didn't work, then, nothing will work kind of thing. And so that's a great insight. And I like that idea because that's something we can even do ourselves, right? If we're having issues, that we can kind of start clean and see and introduce different foods and see how they react with us. And that is one of the things you bring up in the book is how important protein is. I was shocked. I must admit this shocked me that 70% of Americans are protein deficient. Why? Why are we so protein deficient and why is it so important for us to have protein?
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand there's two different numbers really that are important to shoot for. One's the RDA, which is the recommended daily allowance of protein, and the other one is more of like what we call the optimal protein consumption, which is what I'll focus on.
Okay.
But the RDA is like 0.3 grams times your lean body mass or goal body weight, and so most people are going to hit RDA because your body's just going to crave it. Right. So, for example, a lot of female clients, when they first start working with me, they eat on average 40 grams of protein a day or 50 grams of protein a day, which technically does meet the RDA. You're not going to die. Right. Because if you don't eat any protein, or if you don't eat enough protein, protein is an essential macronutrient. Like you will die if you don't eat enough protein, right? Okay. And so your body naturally is going to crave, your body naturally is going to crave a certain amount of protein just to keep you alive. Right? And so, but the more important number isn't just like, let's stay, not dead, but rather like, okay, what do we need to optimize our health, which is the 0.7 grams times your goal body weight or lean body mass. And so, for easy math, if you weigh 100 pounds, which I don't know anybody weighs 100 pounds, but if you weigh 100 pounds, you would need 70 grams of protein minimum to hit that optimal protein number to optimize muscle growth, muscle maintenance, hormonal health, energy levels, satiety cues. And so that's a very different number. So, and so most people who definitely don't weigh 100 pounds still don't even hit the 70 gram mark. Right.
Wow.
And so if you weigh 150 to 100 pounds, that number potentially gets doubled, right? Yeah. You're talking about 120 to 150 grams of protein per day for the average person as a baseline. So
protein, obviously, you just listed all these things that it does for us. What are the best sources? And I mean, if you're talking 70 grams for somebody that's 100 pounds, very few of us are that.
Yeah.
Right. How do we get a lot of protein? I mean, that just sounds like a lot to me. Maybe it's not. Maybe I just don't have the picture in my head.
Yeah, I jokingly tell a lot of my clients that when they first start kind of eating enough protein, I say, if you're not shaking your fist at my imaginary face by the end of the day because you don't want to eat any more protein, you're probably not eating enough protein.
Really?
And so the easiest way I typically will frame it, and once again, this is not something I start my clients with. This is a goal we work towards. Because it can feel kind of overwhelming and like a lot of food.
Right.
But ultimately, like even for myself, I try to get 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. Right. Okay. So what does that look like? For dinner, one whole chicken breast has about 40 to 45 grams of protein in it.
Okay.
Most people don't eat a whole chicken breast at dinner. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Right? And so another kind of metric is if you put your hand up and look at the size of your palm, not including your fingers and thumb, that's about one portion of protein, depending on the protein. So think of like a lean burger patty.
Okay.
Right? A lean burger patty will be about 20 grams of protein. Okay. So having 1 to 2 palms of protein, of lean protein on your plate. So things like eggs, egg whites, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, chicken, steak, lean ground beef, wild game, if it's lean, shellfish, it's great. So we just avoiding super fatty cuts of meat, like 70-30 ground beef. It tastes super good because there's a lot of fat, but it's a lot of fat, right? And so typically what I'm buying is like 93% lean ground beef. Does it taste as good as 70-30? Of course not, right? That's, so
I'm glad you're honest.
No, yeah, I never want to lie to people, and because so many times you see these people online like, this tastes just like pizza, and they meant like a cauliflower pizza or something like that. Yeah. And I'm like, no, it tastes like cauliflower pizza. It does not taste like pizza. And I'm not even saying that it's bad.
No,
just don't say it tastes as good.
Right, exactly.
And so a lot of the tricks with protein and even nutrient density in general is not fooling yourself. Like, it doesn't have to look super sexy, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be the best thing you've ever tasted since you were 5 years old. Like, no, like that's not the goal. We can just treat this like we're adults and like, yeah, it tastes good. It tastes fine. Like, it's good. Right. Yeah. And it's good for us and it's going to make me feel good. And now the longer you do that for, then your taste buds will adjust to it and acclimatize, and your neurotransmitters from your tongue to your brain will kind of calm down a little bit, because part of this too, for a lot of people, is if you're so used to hyper palatable, highly caloric things, there is a response, right? There's a biological response that when you eat that like your endorphins and neurons just go crazy, right? Like when you eat like your favorite dessert, right? So for me, my favorite dessert, cheesecake. I love me some cheesecake. Like it's awesome. And so there's a pleasure like reaction. And so when you first start transitioning to more of a minimally processed whole foods, a higher protein count, there's almost going to be like this letdown after a meal because you're looking for that high again.
Right.
And it takes time to kind of break that addiction, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So Chase, you brought this. I mean, we're talking about protein, but I've read things on like, 'cause for a long time, I've always tried to be healthy, but there were periods of my life I wasn't. But there are, the whole thing about, fat's bad. And, we have heart disease in my family. So it's like, so I was always very low fat, non-fat this, low fat that. And then you read stuff about, well, that's not good. You need fat. And then, carbs, no, don't eat carbs. Carbs are terrible. And then other people are saying carbs are good. The only thing I kind of get a consistent no on is sugar. But can you kind of enlighten us in these areas like fat and carbs, and is it good? Is it bad? How do I know? And am I right that sugar's never good?
Yeah, good question. So once again, there is no food really that I'll say nobody can ever eat in any way, shape, or form.
Got it.
For most people, there's a time and a place. Like I just mentioned that I like cheesecake. And so my wife this past Christmas, literally just a couple weeks ago, she makes this like candied cranberry cheesecake.
Ooh.
And it's amazing. And I eat like 3 slices of it. It's awesome. Now, do I do that every day? Of course not. Right. And so I think part of this is also just understanding how to live liturgically. Right? If every day is a feast day, then no day is a feast day.
Right.
But if you truly only feast on feast days, you're not eating this kind of stuff very often. Right. Like if you say I'm going to eat yummy food on solemnities, right? So maybe Sunday I'm going to have something yummy, and then on Christmas, on Easter, on Immaculate Conception, like that's not a lot of days of the year, just percentage wise, right? It doesn't mean that whole day you're gorging, right? You're just saying this one meal, like this one day, I'm going to have something that I enjoy,
right?
And so once again, there's going to be specific situations for specific people where specific foods are always going to be a no-go. But in general, right, carbs, right, and sugars and carbs, it's the same word, right? It's the same thing, you know? So every carb is a sugar. Every sugar is a carb. Right? Now, there are complex carbohydrates and there are simple carbohydrates. So most people, when they say sugar is bad, what they're really talking about is a simple carbohydrate, right? Easily digestible. It'll get in your bloodstream very quickly. So things like juices, candies, right? Sweets, those are all primarily, simple carbohydrates, right? Complex carbohydrates being like whole wheats, fruits and veggies a lot of the times, potatoes, oatmeal, those are more complex. So they're longer chains and they take longer to break down. So it doesn't spike your blood sugar as quickly. And so carbs in and of themselves are not bad for you. In fact, they're your body's preferred source of energy. Now, what a lot of times you'll hear online is that your body doesn't need carbs to survive, therefore don't eat it. And so just because your body can survive without something doesn't mean it should survive without that thing.
Okay.
And so once again, sometimes people will make the fallacy of appeal to nature. The caveman didn't need any of this stuff and, they were in optimal health. It's like, well, the caveman died at 25 years old on average, actually. And so that's probably not okay. But also, we actually have studies where groups of scientists followed around hunter-gatherer tribes who still exist to this day, right? And what they found was that they just ate whatever they could find, including honey, berries, right? Fruit that grew naturally, vegetables that grew naturally that they knew they could eat. Those are carbs, right? Those are all sugars. And so, so I think understanding that if though we can eat mostly minimally processed whole foods. What do I mean by that? So foods that are minimally processed. So things like whole wheat breads, whole wheat pastas, fruits, vegetables, proteins, olive oil, avocado oil, things like this, right? That are generally, they don't take a lot of processing. If you wanted to, you could probably grow it or kill it or make it at home. Like you can make like whole wheat pasta in your home if you needed to.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so you can make bread in your home, like sourdough breads and things. You can make those. Could you make an Oreo at home? No, not really.
No.
Right? Like you can make an Oreo type cookie, but it definitely wouldn't be an Oreo.
Right. Okay.
Now, also, I'm not saying Oreos are bad for you.
Right.
I'm just saying that in general, if I had to put a percentage to it, I would say 85% of the time, if we can eat the minimally processed things, the high protein, fruits and veggies, getting our fiber up, all these things, that frees you up to then every once in a while, 10 or 15% of the week, you can, like for me, I took my kids to Chick-fil-A and I wasn't worried about gaining weight.
Right.
The thought did not cross my mind.
Right.
Now, part of that also is because I do work out. And so when you work out well and you have muscle mass, your body's ability to utilize these things like sugars and carbs and energy actually increases. It gets better.
Right.
So, longer conversation there, but ultimately there is no one food that's bad for you.
So Chase, that brings me, because I'm going to kind of wrap in two things here. First of all, if you're increasing protein, let's say, but you're not doing any workout, anything like that, will your weight automatically go up?
Good question. Yeah. So we have some studies on this actually. And so typically when they find that people increase and optimize their lean protein consumption, typically on average, what's going to happen is a body recomposition, which is you actually will gain a little bit of muscle mass, even if you don't really work out. Not going to be a ton, obviously, but a little bit. But because you're eating more lean protein, you're going to feel more full and you'll naturally kind of eat less carbs and fats. And so you actually will lose a little bit of body fat along the way. So typically in my experience, when people just add protein without working out or anything, their weight actually won't really change that much. They'll recomp, right? So they'll build a little muscle, lose a little bit of fat. And then, though, if they start working out on top of that, they're going to build muscle even more efficiently. They'll burn more fat efficiently, and so they'll recomp even more. And then if they can optimize protein, fiber, exercise, and get in the caloric deficit, they will then start really losing body fat while protecting and building muscle. And that's when, the magic starts happening.
So, and I want to get to that move because I love that, your very first chapter was just like your first rule is just move, do something, move, And you talk about resistance training and cardio training. I mean, I think, most people focus, and maybe it's just me, because I don't go to a gym or do things like that. I don't like gyms. I'd rather just exercise on my own. But then that means that I usually just do cardio, walks or golf or biking or things like that. But you say resistance training is really important. Why is that? And especially because we're talking, I'm 70. Okay, so this idea that, you get older, you start to kind of wonder, like, should I be doing that or not? So kind of fill us in a little bit on why resistance is important and how do we adapt that as far as age is concerned?
Yeah, well, I'll put this very practically. All of us know somebody who, after the age of 50, has fallen, broken a bone, and then never been able to recover. Right.
Right.
We all, every single person knows and has heard that story or knows somebody personally. Part of the reason that happens is because they've lost bone density. Right. The way you lose bone density is when you don't have muscle. Right. And so resistance training leads to stronger muscle, leads to stronger bones, leads to a better quality of life where you can be in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you don't have to be as fearful as if I fall, it's game over.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And there's studies even showing that they took a cohort of individuals in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. These people had never worked out. They started them through a workout training where they were just lifting a couple days a week. It wasn't like every day by any means. And what they found is that people, even in their 90s, can grow the same percentage of muscle as somebody in their 20s and 30s.
Wow.
Right? Now that doesn't mean they gain the same amount of total weight of muscle, right? But percentage-wise, they optimized their protein, they started working out, and they still built muscle. So there is never an age where someone cannot build muscle. Now, a lot of times people, though, they think, though, that, oh, if I can't work out like I did when I was in my 20s, what's the point?
Right.
It's like, no, like that's, you're not in your 20s. You don't have to work out. Like if you're not an athlete, if your income isn't contingent on the way your body looks or performs, you don't have to be as crazy.
Right.
And so resistance training is so important. So I say this in the book, but you can think of resistance training as more of a quality of life question.
Okay.
Right? And cardio is more of a longevity question. Right. So cardio is great. Resistance training is great. We need both. Cardio is more of a longevity question, keeping your heart healthy, all these things. Resistance training comes from more of like, okay, but when you're 90, are you still going to be able to move? Right.
Right.
So move well.
So with resistance training, is that something you can do at home? I mean, you hear that most people do that in gyms, but is that something you can do in your house without putting in a home gym?
Yeah, no, totally. So when I started working with Dan, I had him get what's called TRX straps. And these things, they weigh 2 pounds, and all you need is a door, and you close the door, and then they're set up. And you can do tons of workouts on them. So all resistance training is loading your body or certain body parts through a certain movement pattern and doing that repetitively. So, for example, a body weight squat. You don't need any piece of equipment to do a body weight squat. Or, if you want to know what a body weight squat is, sit in a chair and sit up straight and stand up and then sit back down. You've just done a body weight squat, right? Do that 20 times. Boom. You've just done a leg workout, right? And so no, by no means do you need to go to a gym. Now, I think gyms are great because they have access to machines. So if you've never worked out before, machines are very, very good because you don't have to worry as much about coordination or balance. Because the machine's only going to move one way. Right. And so it helps you to really just focus on getting stronger, building some muscle, getting you comfortable in a gym so that way you can start to do more dumbbell or other work that requires maybe more balance and coordination and things like that. But that being said, if somebody's just never going to go in a gym or they don't have a gym easily accessible, there's lots of bodyweight exercises, or like I mentioned with Dan, go to Amazon, type in TRX straps or TRX home gym or whatever. And, they're like $100 or $120, but I've had mine for like 6 years and they're still great. Right. So, and they can fit in a carry bag too. So if you're traveling, you can put them in your carry-on. Okay.
We've got
about a great piece of equipment.
4 minutes left. And I do want you to say something about sleep because that is a part of your book too. And again, I recommend this book for people that are thinking, I got to do something. I got to get healthy, physically healthy. But again, like I said, he weaves in this whole spirituality and emotional. So it's wonderful. But go ahead. Tell us what you can about sleep and what can we do to help us sleep better at night if we struggle with that? Why is it important?
Yeah. So sleep is kind of everything. And so if you work out hard, eat well, but if you don't sleep, you're really you're shooting yourself in the foot, basically. Right? Sleep is the primary place where our body builds muscle and loses fats. People ask, how do you lose fat? You burn it off. What does that mean? It means you oxidize it. And, so that means when you sleep, your body recognizes you're in a caloric deficit. It needs to access that fat for energy. And so it will, through lipolysis, fancy word, basically that fat cell will shrink and it will release ATP, which is energy, water, which you'll pee out in the morning, and also carbon dioxide, which you literally breathe out while you sleep. Right. And so sleep is so important. And now it's hard depending on age, because some people, they sleep less or sleep worse as they age.
Yeah,
but it's so important to think about. And so by no means are any of the things I'll say magic bullets, but they're ways of setting yourself up for success. So first and foremost, exercise actually will help with sleep because your body will crave rest. Right. And so if you don't move around during the day, if you're taking naps, or if you just don't do a lot, you just don't need as much sleep because, your body's like, yeah, dude, you didn't do anything. So I'm not tired. Right. But other things we can do to set ourselves up for success, an hour before we want to be in bed and falling asleep, we avoid all screens, right? No cell phones, no TV, no computers. And really the hour before sleep, the whole goal is to de-stimulate. Okay. Right? To bring down the gears, right? Work gets turned off, screens get turned off, we are, maybe drinking some, decaffeinated warm beverage, or we're doing some spiritual reading, and we're even avoiding books that are going to get your mind racing, like horror books or whatever. Like,
right.
No, like that's not destimulating, right?
Okay.
And even like if you can have a conversation with a girlfriend or a spouse that is going to be chill, that's not going to get your mind racing, great. But if your girlfriend's calling you and, she wants to vent about her life, which is going to get your heart racing, then say, hey, let's talk about this tomorrow, like not an hour before bed. Right?
Got it.
But also, even before that, caffeine stays in your system for, about 8 hours after you drink it. So,
right.
I tell all my clients, like after like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, not a caffeine goes into your system, not a Diet Coke, not a coffee, no sodas, like no green teas, because if that's in your system, even if you do manage to fall asleep or lose consciousness, I should say, your sleep quality will not be good.
Okay.
Because you have caffeine in your system.
Okay.
So lots of things, but the biggest thing is to set yourself up for success and, move during the day. And those two things over time can really go a long way.
Oh my, Chase, there is just so much. And can you, in a minute, tell me a little bit about your Catholic fitness coaching? Is it HyperoFit?
Yeah, it's HyperoFit. So we're the world's first Catholic-based nutrition and fitness company. So we really do two things. We do one-on-one coaching for those needing a customized plan, accountability, and support while staying in line with the faith. We also have an app in the App Store for subscribers as well. So we have tons of workout programs, a macro calculator, food log, hours of education content on all this stuff, as well as a great community as well. So our mission is really to bring people an authentically Catholic but a technically excellent approach to health, to exercise, and nutrition.
And it's HYPURO FIT.org, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So that's a great thing to check out. If our conversation today, you thinking, I'd like to know more, that's a great place to go. But also great book to have. The God of Endurance. He's got the last chapter, especially talks about, putting it all together and coming up with plans. And it's really good. I would encourage you to take a look at this book because it certainly does talk about bringing virtue into our physical health, which is really important. Thanks again, Chase, for being with us. And I want to let the audience know today's guest, Chase Crouse. He's got a great background. He's a revert to the faith, part of Net Ministries, has his undergrad and his master's in biblical theology. And he's combining theology of the body with fitness. He's a husband and father of 4. And he pulls everything together. He's a certified personal trainer, functional fitness specialist, nutrition coach, change psychology specialist, just an amazing guy. And you have the website, HyperoFit.org, so you can check out more. And so as we begin this new year together, have a healthy week ahead, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And thanks for listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.